Okay, guys, so before I get into this episode, I gotta tell you guys about this amazing app that I found for podcasters. If you are interested in podcasting, never had a podcast before, know nothing about podcasting, I'm telling you, you want to download this app. It's called the Anchor app. Now, the Anchor app has literally everything you could ever need to build your podcast for absolutely $0. I am not joking. It's literally what I use to record my podcast every week. If you are at all interested in getting into the game, you want resources, you want to be able to record with friends, you want to be able to have all the things that you need basically as a starter kit, you want to download this app. Just go to anchor.fm and get started. Guys, you're going to thank me later, I'm telling you. Hello, beautiful people, and welcome back to another episode of the All Black Matters podcast. Hey, we back with another one. I am so sorry for the little hiatus, guys. You know, it's been crazy. But I'm back, and I got more energy than ever. And I also got a really dope episode for you guys today, so stay tuned. Hey, come through, just you or your crew. I just want to tell you about some news you could use. It's the All Black Matters podcast. Hey. So this week, I decided to sit with a dope Black creative. She is a makeup artist in all her rights, child. She's traveling the world doing a damn thing. And she's been doing this for quite some time. And I thought it'd be really interesting to talk to her about what it's like to be in a field of beauty as a Black woman. And more specifically now with everything going on with COVID, with Black Lives Matter movement, with all of the stuff that's been happening. I was like, let's just talk about it. Let's just rap about it. And so here's my conversation with Jasmin. Jasmin?
Whoa. This is so cool. Basically, you could cancel your phone plan and use this.
I'm dead. How's your week been?
To be honest, I've been using this week to kind of do nothing. You know, when you need those days or a week or whatever to like recuperate or just like pause your brain or even like physically if you're doing too much the week before, like I needed a pause.
So one thing that's probably worth mentioning about Jasmin is that she's Canadian. So, you know, as far as like this whole pandemic thing, it's probably been a bit different. So I was really interested in finding out how she thought her government was taking care of, you know, the citizens there versus how we've been taken care of here in the US. Some of us anyway.
In terms of COVID, it's very different, I feel like, because my mom always has CNN on in the house, like always. Yeah. And obviously the star of CNN is America and what you guys are doing. So I feel like I've definitely seen, just in terms of like hearing about the different states and like what they're doing. In terms of Canada, I'm not going to lie. I feel like, I mean, Canada's not perfect, obviously, but I do feel like they're doing a great job. Our border is still closed. You can still travel out, to be honest, but it's kind of like at your own risk type of thing. You can't drive across the border. It's essential workers only. In terms of, you know, government checks, they were really good about that. A lot of people received it like literally 2 to 3 days after they applied for it.
Wow.
They've extended it. Yeah, like even in terms of like, you know, most people are going back to work or back at work at this time. Obviously, you know, so many things have changed for so many people. A lot of people have lost their jobs. A lot of jobs aren't really needed right now. A lot of companies have went under. So the government has definitely been helping with that too. So yeah, all in all, like I do feel like Canada, there is a huge difference. We were a little bit more proactive, like even down to right now, you know, you cannot enter stores. Like I know I was hearing on the news in the States, I think more specifically LA, I'm not sure though, don't quote me, but only now it's coming down to where specific companies are ordering where you can't come into the store without a mask, where in Canada you can't enter any public place without a mask.
And you guys don't have like, you haven't had any like high numbers either, right? Because as far as the amount of cases that you found in Canada?
Yeah, like I actually saw yesterday, I think we're not like, I think we had in total amount of cases like 100,000 across Canada, I believe. So that's even good, not even Ontario. I'm not sure though, to quote me, but and then we had like 78,000 recovered. So it's like, you know,
that's really good.
Right. The ratio between that has been really good. And even I was actually even talking to my mom about it yesterday in terms of testing. I saw they were saying on CNN that in some cases it's taking people up to 2 weeks to get their results, where in Canada we get them latest 72 hours. So it's like, you know, even that, like, there's so many
it's
things.
just like a world of difference, because obviously everyone knows that Florida's going under right now.
Right,
like,
right.
It's crazy. And then also just like having access, like you said, to testing. Like, so you guys have the access and then you are getting the turnaround time. There's certain states, and I don't think that, well, in New York we're a little bit better because testing has been something that we've been really good at. But in other states, it's like they don't even have access to testing, and the sites that are open, they have to wait all day. And, you know, it's been insane. It's really been, so yeah, there's definitely a difference in Canada than there is in certain parts of America. So being that Jasmin is a professional makeup artist, I was interested in knowing how like the pandemic affected her work-wise and just like mentally. Every facet of life is different now. How has that been for you? And then also just like, I guess, adjusting to what that means for you in your life, in your line of work and everything like that.
I mean, I'm a makeup artist, so I'm literally in people's faces. So it was definitely a struggle. I've now gone back to work, but, you know, being out of it and not being able to have that human contact, so like that I'm so used to was pretty difficult. Quarantine and like having that time to kind of, you know, get things taken away from us that we took for granted, kind of into perspective. So I'm not going to sit here and say I'm not thankful for the time.
Even though I'm not a makeup artist and I'm not like, I don't have most of the time a very physical job, I don't think it affected me until like more recently, like especially now that, you know, things are kind of opening back up. But me just seeing everyone kind of congregate together and be doing things, I'm just like, oh my gosh, I miss it. But yeah, kind of similar to you, I feel like more so on like just having friends around and talking to people and hugging people. Not so much hugging people, but more so just being around them is probably the hardest part.
Right. And like, just as you said, like, I mean, here in Canada, we have patios open, we have bars. Well, not bars, but actually, yeah, we have bars. But yeah, like we have certain things open, but obviously there's rules in place and there's things that we're not used to as like a society. Like, for example, like our malls are open, but we have to walk in a certain direction. You know, there's checkpoints at each point in a mall, certain amount of people in stores. Like, we're not used to that, you know, and especially in like North America, we're so used to like also getting things so fast and not, you know, not lining up, like getting things quick in and out. So like us having to line up everywhere 6 feet apart, only a certain amount of people in the store, like we're also not used to that too. So it's a huge adjustment, you know, for us to get used to.
So just to pivot the conversation a bit, I wanted to get Jasmin's take on the current climate, just like the Black Lives Matter movement and what it's like to be in the field of beauty in that industry, given everything that's going on. Like seeing all of these things happen in 2020, you know, how has that been for you? As a Black woman.
Right. It's 2020 has definitely been a lot, but yeah, I feel like it was an eye-opening experience even for myself, like, you know, like to really, I mean, we've joked around about it before, but like, you know, I always try and see the world in like Technicolor glasses and in a way
rainbows and sunshine,
right? And while I, you know, don't think that's a horrible thing, I think it's also obviously important to see things for what they truly are, so things can change, because it's still a problem. I feel like obviously, because, you know, protests have lessened, things have gotten back to quote unquote normal, that a lot of people feel like, okay, we addressed it, it's cool, like, you know, next. But it's still going on, you know, since George Floyd, how many more has there been?
Right.
And, you know, on top of that, like, if we're not even talking about killings, like how many more videos have we seen about people? Unfortunately, not much has changed. You know, I was watching videos from like 90s, like, which it wasn't really that long ago. Similar things were going on now. It's just like everyone's saying, just now there's more cameras. I feel like a lot of the world too for a while thought it was just George Floyd we were talking about, and unfortunately he had to be the, I don't even want to say this, but like spokesperson.
Yeah, like the martyr.
Right. That I feel like, you know, once his killers got arrested, that people thought like the fight was over in a sense. It's like a double-edged sword, because part of me is like, okay, great, like, you know, maybe there'll be change, maybe things will happen, you know, people will come together and things will change. But then you see things like, you know, Breonna Taylor's case is still, you know, I can't remember the young boy's name, but the one that was murdered and rolled up in a gym mat, and, you know, it was just called suicide. Like, you know, meanwhile, we're all knowing about this story. Like, you know, that's, I think that's another thing too. Like, before, you know, unless it was major news, you wouldn't hear about all of these cases, you know, like we wouldn't know about it. It might be a local thing, maybe a neighborhood thing. Oh, you heard about so-and-so, but it wouldn't be a world. Like, now we all know, and people are taking, you know, actions, you know, to call, to email. And the fact that like things are still not much difference, you know.
I think that on social media, at least, a lot of this is like losing steam, as far as like people constantly talking about the justice that still hasn't been served, you know, for a lot of these people that have died. And like you said, I think that a lot of people think, people who are not plugged in, people who are not actively doing their research would think, oh yeah, well, it was just about George Floyd and now that's done, so we're done, you know. And now that kind of we're in an era now, I think, in this movement where a lot of bigger businesses, I know that at some point throughout the pandemic, there were like calls to action for a lot of these bigger brands to kind of say something, and you know, because we support them. A lot of our Black dollars is what, you know, makes them flourish. And we kind of had this conversation about, you know, where's our money going? Where are we investing our dollars, and how can we grow our own things as opposed to growing people who don't really care about us or not advocates for our lives. So within that conversation, there was a lot of big brands who were kind of like, okay, yeah, Black Lives Matter. We support Black Lives Matter. We love you guys, you know. And it kind of became this thing where it's like a campaign almost, instead of it, in my opinion, instead of it being something that was genuine and, you know, something that we know that you guys have always supported us, it kind of felt like pandering. How do you feel about that?
No, I totally agree. And, you know, for a while I was kind of back and forth with it, because again, like, I'm in an industry where more eyes isn't always a bad thing. You know, that could potentially mean more jobs for me, whatever, especially when it comes to companies, you know, like working alongside them for their campaigns and such. So there was many times where I was like, this is great. They're going to see me. And it was a bittersweet thing for a while also, like, oh, they're only seeing me because, again, just as you said, it feels like a trend right now. If they don't do it, they look like the bad company. If they don't do it, they look like they're not supporting. So they have to say something. But I think it's kind of funny because, like, just as you said, like, you know, these companies were using social media as like a tool to say that they care. So a lot of them posted. What I was more tuning into a lot of beauty companies, of course, because that is my field. I was paying attention to them because I feel like, you know, fashion and beauty is kind of like the pinnacle in what we spend our money on, you know. As humans, we want to feel beautiful, we want to look beautiful, so we buy into that, you know. It's a huge market, and on top of that, the Black dollar spends the most in that in that industry, right? But I found it kind of funny within the, you know, especially as things got back to normal, you know, the brands that would normally show one type of beauty for that week or however long they felt to, they would, you know, throw in who they felt they needed to show diversity. And then now I'm seeing things back to normal, you know, not saying they had to give things to us or, you know, this was the opportunity, but at the same time, you know, the whole point of why this became such a big thing was we have so much to offer in all of these spaces. And, you know, to be honest, I'm not going to lie, I was a little bit naive to think that I was going to start getting, you know, jobs through this, because, you know, I was like, okay, they finally see me there. I'm finally going to get jobs because of this. You know, I have yet to get any paid job since but
Wow.
I've seen a lot of people go back to work
Yeah.
in my industry. And it's been frustrating because I did think things would change, you know. I'm not expecting like everywhere you go, they're only going to hire Black people and that's
Right.
it. But I was expecting that people were going to walk what they talked, you know.
Right. Exactly.
And I'm not gonna lie, I feel like I'm in kind of the same position, that I'm still trying to fight for a seat at the table. And I thought, and I'm not gonna lie, again, I felt a bit naive that they might at least invite me to the table. I would still
Yeah.
obviously have to work, but you know, I might sit in the back a little bit, but I still will be a little bit, you know, at the table. And it's like, I'm not really seeing much of a shift. So a lot of these brands and companies that were saying, you know, even, I'm not sure if you saw, but there was a challenge amongst companies, I think specifically beauty, where they were challenging companies to basically post and make aware of the diversity within the brand,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. As far as employees and things like that.
Right. And, you know, a lot of those brands that were honest and true about like what they have, again, I'm not sure if I'm seeing much change or like them even going further to hire people of color, because sometimes you could even see, because, you know, you'll see a brand do something and be like, so no one in the boardroom talked about that before
Yeah.
they, you know, so it's like,
Yeah.
I'm still seeing things come out from brands where I'm just like, unfortunately, we were again kind of used for our culture and pop, you know.
Yeah,
Things.
it's just been pandering. It's been, to me, in my opinion, that's kind of how I've saw it. You know this, but I've seen it like that from the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't really expect there to be change. Like, I'm someone who's on more on the radical side, where I feel like we need to just be investing in Black businesses and starting Black businesses. You know, only supporting Black businesses, and it's not to say that you can't do your one-off here and there, but I think that the way that we enforce and have lasting change is by really, really focusing on what we can build in our own communities, you know,
Mm-hmm.
like, because that's the only way that we are sure that it's going to stick. You know, I think that when someone gives you something, it's kind of like you have to worry about whether or not they're going to take it back. And
Mm-hmm.
I feel like whenever we're, you know, kind of supporting or expecting or holding these, you know, bigger brands or bigger companies accountable for what they say and do, they can always just take it back. They can always say,
Mm-hmm.
okay, we did that, and now end of conversation. Whereas if we hold the power and we're at the helm of everything, you know, we are always going to be on this same kind of like energy, or I guess the progression of it won't stop, because we're the ones that are being affected by it.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of that, how do you think about, like, in the beauty industry, companies who are Black owned versus, you know, ones who aren't?
Well, definitely during that time, I mean, one thing that I definitely took advantage of was people that were amplifying our voices, even the bigger brands, because I did come to the point where, okay, if you guys are going to do this, I will gladly take the little light shined on me, because like, I'm going to run with it. I'm going to do my
Yeah.
best to push myself so that it could potentially build more jobs for me. And I know so many people within my field as well agreed and, you know, took it for what it was, and said, okay, if you're gonna give me the mic right now, I'll take it. And in terms of Black beauty brands, I have been blessed enough to work with Fenty Beauty a lot. Like, they didn't have to put on a hat for
Yeah.
that time, and that's what was so. I just felt so nice to be a part of that, because
Yeah.
I always felt that, and I always understood that kind of going in, even being on set and kind of seeing the behind the scenes of even the people that were working on it was so diverse, that it was so refreshing for them to put out. They didn't even put out statements, because again, they I mean, they did,
Like, we live this.
right, well, right, yeah, because they obviously spoke on it and said their piece, but just as you said, they can honestly say, and I can even back it up even further to say behind the scenes, that, you know, that this isn't a new game for them. And I remember there was a bit of an, you know, back and forth argument I would see sometimes, where they're like, well, it's not Black owned because Fenty Beauty is under the umbrella of another company. But I do know for a fact that the creator of the brand is very involved, is very voiceful in making sure that it is entirely inclusive. Yeah, she's super involved. And then just the team itself is so diverse that that the products were all thought through, I remember when we were doing the extensions for the foundations, we literally for 3 days matched people to make sure like it was the shade was needed, and if there was any adjustments, and seeing that behind the scenes, to see that they care that much. And because we also live in a world of Photoshop. You can change,
for sure,
this and this about the person, that realistically a brand doesn't have to care that much. They can just make a guesstimate and then adjust it with the pictures, and then if you buy it, that's on you,
right.
and to see that a brand cares that much is really refreshing, and just really nice to see.
So, as someone who has had the privilege of seeing success in the beauty industry, especially as a woman of color, I was interested in knowing, what was next for Jasmin? In your experience and in your field, what do you think your next steps would be? As a Black person who now has influence and now people kind of see you as, I would say, a big deal. What would you say to other people, or how do you think you navigate this space?
Mm-hmm. Well, and me, I'm always like, I still have a lot of way to go, but I do want to eventually, get to that point where I can help someone the way some people have helped me. I just definitely want to be in the space where I can kind of help guide. Even I would love to do that with another Black girl, because I know how interesting the space is to navigate, and I've been lucky enough with my mentor to have someone who cares and actively wants to see growth with me. But it is hard, and funny enough, it's really hard in Toronto, just because for a lot of reasons, but a main one being because it is so small that the jobs that do come along often are often given to the same people. And understanding that kind of early on, and being able to kind of pick myself, unfortunately, out, that I had to not move, but place myself in kind of a different market in a different country. Granted, I'm so thankful and blessed for that, because a lot of people in Toronto are trying to do that,
Yeah.
Where I kind of didn't really start building me until I moved or until I put myself there. And I mean, that was for other reasons as well. I've always wanted to, live in New York. That was always a dream of mine. But I also understood the difference. And I remember, and I reached out to her the other day, but it was the first time I ever did a New York style of fashion show. It wasn't Fashion Week, but it was my first fashion show. And I remember being so excited. And the day I got there, a Black makeup artist ran up to me, and she was like, "Oh my gosh, another Black girl!" And I was like, and I was so, I don't live in New York at the time. It was such a new experience for me altogether. It was a huge brand, also. To be honest, I didn't even read the call sheet properly, so I thought I was doing makeup. I was actually there to assist. I didn't know. I was so just excited to be there, and the fact that this artist ran up to me and was just so excited to talk to me. And we had a conversation, and she just laid out everything for me. And she tried to make it as easy as possible for me to understand how the market was in New York. And I told her, to this day, she doesn't understand how impactful that was for me to even get someone to take the time. And that is one thing that I realized from New York itself, was that sense of community, especially within the Black community, because she didn't have to do that. She could have saw me and said, another Black girl. There's, as we all know, there's only room for one.
Right, exactly.
So I don't know if I want to, she literally, I remember she was like, where's your pen, paper, write this down. And I was like, okay, no problem. And to have that sense of just help in general was so nice.
That's so interesting, because I think that even as a community of Black people, it's either outside of the racism and the things that we experience, I think naturally we're people that likes that, you know what I mean? Kind of we want to share. We want to laugh together. You know, the cookout is a Black thing. You know, we always want to be around each other, just having a good community. So it's really beautiful that that's something that you experience with another Black girl.
Right. And the end of that summer was so refreshing because I ended up bumping into her again at a bigger fashion show.
Oh, wow.
And it was just such a like, oh my gosh moment, because it was like, you know, who's to say that without her advice I would have done certain things.
What advice would you give like a new makeup artist or someone who is interested in doing makeup? You can speak to either in New York, I guess, to a certain extent, and in Canada because of how kind of like spread your experiences.
Well, my first advice in general for anyone who wants to be a makeup artist is, it's going to sound so cheesy, but practice is key. You know, you can't really get good at something without practicing. And my biggest advice is to, you know, work at like a counter or somewhere where you're going to constantly be thrown different skin types, different skin tones, textures, all of that. I think that's super important. I've gotten a lot of, just as you said, like a lot of DMs, but specifically some that are like younger, like they're still, you know, teens and all of that. And I feel like because they're so used to the age of social media and things kind of happening quickly, and or just the social media ways of doing things, like if I do this for free, exposure, you know, things like that.
Right.
To just understand that likes does not pay your bills. Of course, you know, more eyes, more likes, more comments do make a difference. I'm not going to sit here and say they don't, but also just remember that that's not the job. Also understanding the difference between an influencer and a makeup artist. I feel like a lot of people, you know, love the idea of the influencer. You get flown out from brands, you get to go on these cool trips, you get free this, free that. And yes, you can still educate on makeup, but, you know, it tends to be very particular to that person, where a makeup artist is doing makeup on other people. They can do it on a wide range of people. I see it all the time. As a Black makeup artist, you need to know how to slay a Black face, but you also need to know how to slay all of them. And unfortunately, I mean, and that's, and I want to make it clear, especially for anyone listening to this, that needs to become a standard across the board. You know,
exactly.
Like it needs to. Funny enough, I've seen campaign images that are printed, and again, we've talked about where you can edit, you can change colors, where I still see the foundations off, which I never understand. But I think that's super important to know. But all in all, just, you know, in terms of advice, definitely starting out at a counter. And a lot of people think it does happen so quickly. You know, they think, okay, if I get reposted on this big site, followers go up and the jobs come in. And that's not how it happens at all. You know, that you need to understand that it could be a very slow paced race to get to a certain place. And you do have to put, you know, yourself out there, and not saying you have to be overly out there, because another thing too is, you know, there's room for so many personalities. Also, don't give up. I mean, it's good. I know that's another cliche thing to say, but it's so easy to get discouraged. You know, it's one of those things you definitely have to stick with.
That's really good advice. Thank you so much for giving that to anyone that's listening. You heard it here first. You know, you can take that advice and kind of build your career. I also want to just ask you, before we wrap it up, if there's anything that you have upcoming or anything that you kind of want to plug, that you want people to know about, just let the audience know.
Well, I mean, you can follow me on Instagram at JASMINWS. But in terms of things, I've had the pleasure and still pinch me moments of seeing work that I've been able to do in stores. But
I mean, you can say it. You can say
it. Even my hand at one point.
Okay.
But I definitely want it to get to the point one day where I'm seeing it in magazines.
Absolutely.
You know, even bigger billboards where
it's gonna happen.
Right. Let's speak it to existence, but also to the point where it doesn't seem so out of the box anymore, you know, and so crazy ideas and thoughts that could be my work that I'm seeing, you know. And then just speaking to existence, I'm excited for the future jobs. I'm excited for the future collaborations.
Yep.
All of that good stuff. But thank you for having me and speaking to me.
No problem. You know, I always love talking to you, period. You know, we talk all the time. But I'm really happy that, you took the time out because I know it's early.
Well, early for me. Everyone's probably like, how early? It's only 11:30 a.m., but I don't really wake up before 12. So
exactly. So her even waking up and talking to me and like sharing with you guys all this information is so I'm grateful always for, having people in my life that are open to this and support me and, give you guys the content that, I work hard to give you. So thank you again for just taking the time out to discuss what it's like to be a makeup artist, a Black one, and just life.
No problem. And I'll probably call you after this talk.
Absolutely. Well, that's all, folks. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. And don't forget to stay tuned. Don't forget to follow my girl Jasmin on all her socials. They will be, well, she only has one social, but they will be in the description of the pod. And also, follow the All Black Matters podcast on Instagram. Come on, y'all. Y'all slacking. Follow the All Black Matters podcast on Instagram. That also will be in the description of this episode. And yeah, stay tuned next week. Tune in next week and we'll be back at it again.